with us today in this fight. It's why, since we launched this campaign on the 15th of November, we've had the largest number of Texans sign up to become volunteers, to knock on doors, to make phone calls, to meet the voters who will decide the outcome of this election. And folks, we are not waiting to get on those doors for September or October during early voting. We're on those doors right now. In fact, we will have our largest door knocking weekend of action this very weekend in response to that draft decision and these extremist policies from Governor Abbott and the Republican majority in the legislature. In addition, y además, this weekend, Saturday, in Houston, Texas, at Discovery Green at 11 a.m., we are calling on all Texans of good conscience, be they Republicans, Democrats, or Independents, wherever they live in this state, to join us in Houston at 11 a.m. We are going to rally, we are going to organize, and we are going to fight, because when we fight, we win. Last thing that I want to tell you is the reason that I know that we can win in this election, and that I can be the next governor of this state to work with these extraordinary leaders and with the people across the state of Texas to ensure that every woman in this state makes her own decisions about her own body, her own health care, and her own future, is because of the work of those that you're about to hear right now. These are the Texas leaders who've laid the ground, who've made sure to call attention to these extremist policies from Greg Abbott and the Republican majority in the legislature. They've been the ones on the front lines fighting for this, whether it was politically popular or not, to make sure that each and every single one of us, especially the generations coming up, understand what's at stake and the true cost and consequence of keeping current leadership in office. The reason that I know that we can win is because of the people that you're about to hear from, none more so than our next speaker, Wendy Davis. Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here to speak with Beto and these other amazing state leaders today. I want to focus us in for a moment on the reality that people are waking up to in Texas every single day right now. We already know the horrors of what it looks like for Roe versus Wade to end. Under Senate Bill 8 and the 6-week abortion ban that it has put in place, and the more than 8 months that we've lived under it, people wake up to the reality of an unwanted, unplanned pregnancy and the inability to do anything about it. We understand that we are becoming a state that is leading the way on what will likely be the future in probably 26 states across this country. That depending on how much privilege you have, how much money in your bank account, you will have different rights than other people in this country. It's poignant that we're standing in front of the Texas Capitol, because on top of that Capitol is the goddess of liberty. And yet, we live in a state and we find ourselves in a country and with a Supreme Court that no longer believes that we are born with inherent, inalienable rights, liberties, and freedom, but instead that those are things that are granted to us by government and government alone, and that government can take them away at their whim. I'm supporting Beto O'Rourke to be our next governor because he understands how important our freedoms, our liberties, our autonomies over our own bodies are, and how essential that is to living not only our best and fullest lives, but to creating the best and fullest Texas and best and fullest country that we can have. When we take those rights away, we threaten everything that makes us great. I want to live in a state where we have a governor who believes in the freedom and liberty of people to have health care, Medicaid expansion, so that the hundreds of thousands of Texans without health care will finally be able to enjoy it. I want to live in a state where a governor believes in the liberty and freedom for our children to be educated in public schools, where they are supported by adequate funding and where their teachers are elevated and revered rather than reviled and blamed. I want to live in a state where we have a governor who believes in the idea that our children, regardless of their sexual orientation or identity, are precious and deserving of our full support. I want to encourage people who believe in those things along with me to understand that, as Beto said, this is about politics, and that we have the power to make the change that we want to see in this state and across this country in the upcoming midterm election. And regardless of whether you are a Republican or an independent or Democrat, I hope that you will understand how high the stakes are this November, that we are voting for our children and their future. We are voting for our daughters and our granddaughters. We are voting for freedom and liberty that can only be assured by making sure that we put people in place who will fight for those freedoms and liberties. And finally, I want to make sure to speak to the fact that I know we can feel discouraged, that in these moments where redistricting has created a landscape that it feels as though our voices don't matter. Redistricting cannot and will not ever touch our statewide elections. And so no matter if you live in blue Austin, where I live, and you think you're pretty well taken care of because you've got a Democratic elected Senate and House and Congressperson representing you, your voice is needed in this statewide election. Your voice is needed now more than ever to elect Beto and every other Democrat down the statewide ballot. If you live in deep red Comal County, where I was running for Congress last cycle, please understand that while your voice might not be able to make a difference in the outcome of your congressional race in November, your voice is essential to electing Beto O'Rourke as our governor and every other Democrat down the statewide ballot. Your voice matters and counts just as much as any other person who lives in this state. And if we will all exercise the power and the privilege of that voice, we can make the state that we want to live in a reality. Let's commit to this, that not only are we going to vote, but we are going to make sure that 5 friends, just 5 friends understand the stakes in this election, understand the power they each possess, and understand that they have the power to do something to make the change they want to see by voting in November in this important midterm election. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. First, I want to speak to all Texans of any political persuasion because I think that we all agree that we have inherent powers and inherent rights, and that we don't elect officials to come and serve in this building to give us our rights. We elect them to protect our rights. And we certainly don't elect a governor to destroy our rights. I think that is something that every Texan agrees upon. And now I want to speak specifically to Texas moms like myself. I know you're upset right now. I'm upset. And I know you're scared right now. I'm scared. And my stomach is in knots, just like yours. And I can't tell my fellow Texas moms, and us Texas moms certainly can't tell our daughters, that everything's going to be all right. Because this is not all right. We have the power to choose right now. We have the power to choose a governor who will fight for and restore our rights. A governor who will protect our right to decide whether, when, and with whom we have children. We are not alone. In a democracy, you are never alone. And we should remember that as we open the newspaper and read about the Ukraine. In a democracy, we are never alone, and we can do this together. We can demand our rights. The governor and the government does not give them to us. We lend power to our government to protect our rights. This election will define whether women in Texas will have the autonomy over our bodies and our fundamental right to privacy. We cannot let that decision be made by anyone other than the mothers and the daughters of Texas. We will always have our voice, and we will always have our vote. So let's go out there and use it, and as Wendy said, find five others. Find 5 others to take to the polls. Your daughters, your sons, your sisters, your brothers, your husbands, your fathers, your mothers, your co-workers. Do not be afraid if they are from another party, because everyone in Texas believes in our human rights and that the government does not give them to us. Its job is to protect them.
Good morning. I'm Representative Gina Enahus, and I represent Central Austin in the Texas House. The morning after the draft Supreme Court opinion was made public was a regular weekday morning. I took my son to his elementary school, and I saw a bunch of little girls running around. I saw these little girls, and I was struck by a wave of emotion. Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973, the year I was born. My whole life, my whole world has been my whole world has been influenced by knowing I have liberty over my body, freedom over my body. And I thought, what will it do to these little girls? What will it do to their psyche, to their sense of self-worth, to their sense of their own power, to not have that liberty, to grow up in a country where the government does not recognize legal autonomy over her own body. Because if we have no legal autonomy over our body, we are not free. During the last legislative session, I spoke about my own experience. I'm Catholic, and I was pregnant with a non-viable fetus that I found out about in the second trimester of my pregnancy. I made the choice to carry this fetus for 12 months and to labor for 12 hours for a baby I knew would not live. I made the choice. I had the freedom to make the choice. I live in a country founded on religious liberty that allowed me to practice my freedom. But it is a choice that, while I don't regret it, I would not wish it on anyone, and now it is an ordeal that is mandated by our government for any woman who finds out she is pregnant with a pregnancy she does not want for whatever reason, whether it's a non-viable fetus, whether it's because of rape, whatever that reason is, she will be compelled to give labor to this baby, potentially a baby that cannot live. That's all right. By our government. I know many people who are pro-life. I'm friends with people who are anti-abortion rights. I know that for many of them, their beliefs come from a sincere place. But this is not the way to do it. not by limiting the rights of women, not by saying women don't have rights over their body. If we want to end abortion, we do it in our churches, we do it by talking to people we love in our communities, we do it by supporting women, we do it by supporting families. We don't stop abortion by government mandate. This morning I was dropping off my son again at school, and I was walking to my car with another mother, and she asked, "What's happening? Are there rallies? I feel like I want to do something. I feel powerless." And the truth is, as every speaker who has come before you today has said, we have all the power here. The power to change this is completely within our hands. The thing I did after the decision was made public, the draft decision, Supreme Court decision was made public, I went online and I Googled volunteer deputy registrar class, and I took an online course that was about 20 minutes long, and I took the test. You need an 80 to pass. I got an 84. You Google Travis County voter deputy registrar test or class, and it comes up. I will get my packet in the mail to become a VDR. Understand that even with the draconian laws that have been passed by the people, the Republican leadership in this Capitol, and by Greg Abbott, signed into law by Greg Abbott, we still have the freedom and the right to register voters as VDRs. This is something that we can all do, and we can all ensure that our communities vote. Because in the end, we need a governor. We need to vote for Beto. We need a governor who does the work and the will of the people of Texas and not those of the special interests. Thank you.
We have Diana.
Hello, I'm Diana Limon Mercado, the Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Texas Votes. Let's be clear. First, abortion is still legal. It remains your constitutional right today. Health centers are open. Patients who need care should continue to follow through with their appointments, to schedule appointments as they need care in the coming weeks and months. The leaked draft opinion makes it clear that our deepest fears are coming true. The reality that Texans have been facing for 8 months on the ground, where most patients are forced to travel out of state and forced to carry a pregnancy to term against their will, could soon be a reality for the rest of the country. Texas patients have been shocked, devastated, and traumatized. When a patient goes for an appointment, they come knowing that there is already a significant chance they may not be able to get care anywhere in the entire state. The 6-week ban has put access out of reach for most patients. They are in crisis, they are overwhelmed. From having to navigate the existing restrictions, like 24-hour waiting period, mandatory sonogram, and dozens of other restrictions, now they have to navigate all that while making a decision about their health care and their future, getting time off from work, trying to secure funds for their procedure, finding childcare, and navigating logistics to travel out of state for multiple days. Since the 6-week ban has been in place, Colorado Planned Parenthood health centers have seen a 1,000% increase in patients coming from Texas. And the same is true for health centers in other neighboring states like New Mexico, where appointments are booked out for weeks. The impact of overturning Roe will be felt largely by Black, Latino, Indigenous people, immigrants, people living with low incomes, and in rural communities who have long faced the highest barriers to abortion access due to systemic and historic discrimination. If this leaked opinion becomes final, this same reality will be reality for the entire country and worse. We can expect 26 states would move to ban abortion, with 13 of those having trigger laws that would go into effect almost immediately, including Texas. That means 7 million Texas women of reproductive age and others who can get pregnant would lose access almost immediately, and Texas almost completely. And in Texas, abortion would be a felony, punishable by life in prison. We know banning abortion does not stop the need for abortion. It only makes accessing abortion harder for the people with the fewest resources. While we are devastated and furious, know this: we will fight back until our rights are restored, and then some. Roe was never enough and is not enough. We will mobilize now through Decision Day so that the Supreme Court hears us, Congress hears us, and state legislatures hear us. We will turn out voters in this midterm to elect a governor who will fight with us and for our communities, and state leaders up and down the ballot. We won't stop until every single person has the rights, freedom, and access they need and deserve. Count on that no matter what. Thank you.
Senator Eckhart described the way that she felt upon learning this decision, the way that so many of us feel across the state of Texas, that anger, that frustration, but also the ability for all of us to resist the temptation to despair and instead follow the example of Representative Hinojosa, who immediately Googled how to become a volunteer deputy registrar so that she could help add new voters to the rolls. In the 2020 election, there were 7 million Texans who were eligible to vote and did not cast a ballot. 7 million people just in this state. There is a majority out there that supports all the things that Wendy Davis was talking about: funding for our public schools, jobs that pay a true living wage, expansion of Medicaid, and protection of the right for an abortion in the state of Texas, and ensuring that those in this state are able to fulfill their true potential and their true promise. We just have to go out there and find those future voters and invite them into this democracy and make sure that they participate in this next election and win political power. That is the only way to overcome this. I want to make it really clear: no one, but no one, is riding to our rescue from somewhere outside of Texas into this state to save the day. This one is on us. It is on each and every single one of us, and I like those odds, and let me tell you why. Prior to 1973, abortion was illegal in the state of Texas. No one from outside of Texas saved the day to make it legal for women to make their own healthcare decisions in this state. It was actually our fellow Texans, including Jane Roe, including Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, who successfully argued the case before the Supreme Court of the United States, both of them from the state of Texas. Texas was the answer to the challenges that we faced in Texas in 1973. Texas will be the answer to the challenges that we face in 2022. So not only is this possible, we have done it before against much greater odds. We're going to do it again, and we're going to do it because of these extraordinary leaders who have led the way and will continue to lead the way for us. Each one of us is very happy to answer your questions, and I hope that you avail yourselves of those who've been in this fight for so long and have made this moment possible. Chris, do you have any direction?
Start with Madeline and then go to Natalie at ABC.
Great.
Hi, I had a question for you, Beto. I wonder if you could speak to this idea that now other precedent decisions, other landmark decisions are at risk. Specifically, yesterday, Governor Abbott said he wants to resurrect the case that said states have to provide free public ed to all kids, including those of undocumented immigrants.
The logic in this draft court decision is incredibly dangerous. It states, and this is a layman speaking, I'm not an attorney, but as I understand it, that because abortion is not explicitly described as a right in the Constitution, then there is no constitutional protection for it. Well, the same might be true for interracial marriage. The same might be true for same-sex marriage. The same might be true for any of the rights that Senator Eckhart talked about that government does not confer, but instead is there to protect. This is a really dark road that Greg Abbott has put us on in the state of Texas. And if any of the people here have any fault, it was probably a failure to imagine just how bad it could get. That the governor of the state of Texas would pursue the parents of transgender kids under criminal charges to take those kids from them and every other child in the household. That he would turn his back on cops who begged him not to sign permitless carry, did it anyhow, and now more cops have been gunned down in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. A guy who could not keep the lights on when the temperature dropped and passed the bill onto us, $50 increase in our utility bills. This abortion ban that starts at conception through this trigger law that he signed, this is not where it ends. And that's why I love your question. We need to be able to imagine where this guy is going to go if he is able to serve another term in this position of public trust, this position that belongs to the people of Texas. We need someone in that office who's going to reflect the will of the people of Texas. And I can tell you on this issue, people of Texas want to ensure that women can make their own healthcare decisions, and they are concerned about the logical conclusion of this kind of thinking and this kind of governor who is hurting instead of helping the people of Texas.
We've got Natalie straight ahead here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for answering our question. My question for you is, should you be elected governor, are your hands tied for the majority in the state legislature? How do you plan to get over the hurdle if Democrats have the same minority they have now?
I'm going to do everything I can with the power of this office, working with those who have been leading on this issue for so many years, especially those in elected office like Representative Hinojosa and Senator Eckhart, as well as their colleagues from both sides of the aisle. I mentioned being in Canadian Texas, right? Not the deepest blue part of the state. Before I could get to it, someone stood up in the audience and said, I haven't heard you talk about a woman's right to choose yet. This is something that is nearly universal in the state of Texas, regardless of geography, of partisanship, or any other difference between us. People want our rights respected. And I know that public pressure will come to bear in representatives to do the right thing. As we know, and we just saw this in the last year, the governor can call the agenda for the state of Texas. The governor, through that veto power, has leverage to ensure that we bring people to the table and at least start with the common ground, those places where we can agree. And I tell you what, when we remind our colleagues in this building that Texas leads now the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality, 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas, because as we have closed down reproductive health care options, not only is it harder for a woman to get an abortion, but it's harder to get a cervical cancer screening or any kind of reproductive health care, or just health care at all in some counties when you're the least insured state in the union. I think the people are going to come through on this one. The people are our allies, and with their help, we will be able to get this done.
We've got Paul at the AP to your right.
Do you feel that this issue has now created a bright line in any race? Because there's a member of your party, Representative Cuellar, who does not support abortion rights. That being said, would you urge any voter to think twice about voting for him in this runoff?
This week has made the consequences more clear than they've ever been of the people who are on the ballot, whether in this special election or whether in November. And I trust the people of Texas, because I've met them across this state, to make the right decision in our interests, in their interests. Now, whether that's in South Texas and Laredo, whether it's in the other 253 counties of the state of Texas, this is not something that any of us need to tell anyone to do. People are already there. I mentioned we've had the greatest number of signups for volunteers. The RSVPs for the Discovery Green event this Saturday in Houston is off the chart. People willing to go out and knock on doors. And I guarantee you, people who will show up and participate in this next election. In 2018, working together, we helped to produce the largest voter turnout in Texas since 1970. We are going to exceed that in this year, in large part because of this issue.
So we're going to come to the Texas Tribune over here. Jason?
If you're facing a similar Republican majority in the legislature, what specific actions would you be able to take as governor to protect women's right to choose?
First, I'm not willing to concede that we'll be working with a Republican majority. This, among a number of other issues that we have brought up today, is galvanizing the electorate and the future electorate in the state of Texas. Those 7 million that I just described, to put them in perspective, I lost to Ted Cruz by 216,000 votes. There's 7 million out there who we have not yet heard from. So not only will they have an impact on the outcome of this governor's race, but these state representative and state senate races and contests for positions of power up and down the ballot, we are going to hear from them loud and clear. And this issue, I guarantee, is going to bring people out. And when we meet them where they are, by showing up at their door and knocking on it, and in our own words, from our own heart, describing just how important this election is for all of us, we're going to see a record turnout, and that majority that we all know that exists in Texas that wants to secure these rights and protect them going forward. As governor, I'm going to work with the legislature, And it's anyone, anytime, anywhere, without preconditions on party affiliation or past positions or how they voted before. We need to get this done. And in this position of public trust, where we have the ability to help the people of Texas, we will not rest until we're able to do that. I mentioned some of the tools the governor has, whether it is defining the agenda, using the power of the veto, but also working collaboratively with legislators on other issues that are important to them, and then seeking out the common ground on this one. We may not see eye to eye on every single aspect of this, but as described in that poll that was just released yesterday, the vast overwhelming majority of Texans, Republicans and Democrats alike, want to see us do better, and they understand that these laws signed by Abbott are bad, and they want to overcome them, and they want to fix them. We're going to be the instruments of that political power of the people of Texas. We're going to get the job done.
We've got Ellie at Star Telegram.
Hey, I wanted to ask you a little bit following up on what you just said. What, and perhaps of Senator Davis too, having been in the position of having run for governor before, what specific role do you see this issue, this draft opinion, and the eventual final opinion that could come depending on where it falls, playing in the governor's race in terms of swaying it one way or the other in your favor or otherwise? What role do you see this particular issue of Roe v. Wade and abortion rights playing?
I'll briefly answer, and then I would love Senator Davis to provide her answer. I know from what I can see in terms of the signups, we had 62,000 volunteers last week. We have 67,000 volunteers as of this morning and counting. And again, these are people who aren't just retweeting or posting on Facebook or showing up to a rally or an event. These are people who just signed up to grab a clipboard and go knock on the door of a stranger and have a conversation about this specific issue. That is really powerful. And we can come up with the most brilliant television ads. We can raise tens of millions of dollars. We can say the most brilliant things. Nothing is as powerful as a volunteer, another human being showing up at your door and having a conversation with you about the thing that matters most to you in your life. That is transformational, and that's how we're going to win. So this is going to have a significant bearing on the outcome of this race, certainly in our favor. And when I say our favor, it is those of us who believe in the United States Constitution, who believe in this democracy, who believe in our rights and want to see them protected. Anecdotally, we are hearing from Republican after Republican who said, I don't know if I was going to be able to bring myself to vote for you in this race because of this or that issue, or because I've always voted for Republicans and never voted for a Democrat. But after this decision and understanding the stakes and thinking about my granddaughters, I'm with you in this one. And I just want to make sure, Beto, that you are going to fight to make sure that you win, and that when you win, that you overturn this and overcome it. So you will see that for sure at the ballot box this November. I'm going to ask Senator Davis to add her comments.
Just to very briefly add on to what Beto really has already stressed. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
To add on to what Beto has already stressed, it can oftentimes be difficult to get people to engage in midterm elections. We find ourselves captured constantly and consistently in the media to national elections and understanding the importance of those. But I think knowing that it's quite unlikely that we will see the Women's Health Protection Act pass at the congressional level, it really raises the stakes on this particular issue about what we do at the state level. And I believe that as a consequence of our understanding the threat that we now face, the very real threat that our daughters and granddaughters face, we will engage in this midterm election in a way that we have not in the past and in the way that we may not have in this particular race. Understanding, as Beto said, no matter our political identity, we all have daughters, granddaughters, and sisters who will be impacted by this law. And we understand what it means not only to their personal liberty and autonomy, but also to our full economy. And knowing that, I believe we're going to see an extraordinary turnout in this race. And I think, as Beto said, an extraordinary increase even in the number of volunteers who are willing to do everything they can to help direct the outcome in a way that's favorable.
Earlier this week, Governor Abbott talked about the 2014 race as having been a referendum on abortion, and he won that handily. He was all that willing to have another referendum on abortion. And I'm wondering, are there lessons from 2014 that y'all have been able to talk about as to, is there a point where abortion issues aren't effective in this campaign, or where do we go from there?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
I'll tell you, the reason that we're here, the reason that I have an extraordinary opportunity to serve this state as governor is because of Wendy Davis and the race that she ran in 2014. Not only did she ensure that the people of Texas understood the consequence of Greg Abbott, and also on the positive side, the ability for us to have those rights that were so hard won protected going forward. She was a fierce advocate on all the other issues that you hear me talking about, public education, the kinds of jobs that we want to see here. A reminder that this state is big enough for all of us to rise up to our full potential and our full promise. Folks are out there right now, they're energized, and I will tell you, especially young people, some of whom are too young to vote for Senator Davis in 2014, who are with us in the most beautiful way right now. They are the ones knocking on doors in January and February when it's really cold in North Texas. They're the ones who are recruiting their friends. They're the ones signing up to be volunteer deputy registrars on their college campuses, bringing people in, and they themselves were brought in by Wendy Davis. So, these issues aren't always decided within a single election cycle, but the impact of the kind of leadership that Wendy Davis has provided to the people of Texas is still being felt, and perhaps I'm in a privileged position, having been to every one of these counties, met so many voters, to be able to tell you that the reason that we're going to win is because of Wendy Davis, and in large part because of what she did in 2014.
Thank you, Beto. The only thing I'll add to that is 2014 was not a referendum on abortion rights. Most voters had no idea who Greg Abbott was when they voted for him. They defaulted to their Republican voting habit without a full understanding of exactly what they were voting for. But now we know. This right that many people believed would never go away, in spite of what their elected officials or candidates were saying, always believed that the court would be a backstop to protect it. And they didn't have to worry, really, that the people they were voting for stood for repeal of these rights. And now we understand in a way that we never have. This right is going away. And if we don't elect people who are going to fight for the futures of our daughters and granddaughters, we are going to have the future we deserve. And we all understand, I think, more than ever, the stake that our voices have in the outcome of this issue.
Senator Davis, how frustrating is it that Donald Trump basically telegraphed, I'm putting these three people, or these three like minds, on the Supreme Court, and yet it wasn't enough to energize those who would agree with you on the choice issue? I mean, they knew that the Ginsburg, or that the Scalia seat was not going to be filled by Obama. They knew that Ginsburg was getting older and that Kennedy was getting older too, and yet they still didn't quite gravitate to the message that you guys are trying to sell here.
I think that people always believed, no matter what, that the courts would ultimately protect this right. I believed even this Supreme Court would overturn Senate Bill 8. And it wasn't until they didn't do it that I understood how deeply dangerous the situation before us is. These justices looked at the U.S. Senate and promised that they respected precedent. And some of the Republicans who voted for them believed that that would be the case. We now know it not to be. And the stakes, the outcome of that perspective means not only, of course, our rights to liberty over our own bodies with reproductive decision-making involved, but of course our rights to decide whom we marry, whom we love, whether we can take measures to prevent unplanned pregnancies. All of this now is at stake, and it's created a deep awareness across America and certainly in this state that the only way we're going to change this is through our vote. And the only way to impact a different outcome is in the political arena.
So we're going to go to NBC right down the middle here.
Hey, Beto. You mentioned the polling, and Senator Davis touched on this a little bit too, but obviously SB 8, the trigger bills, all those things are really unpopular, but the same polling also shows it's not the kind of thing that usually motivates people to go vote. What makes you think this time is different? And after all the debate over abortion in Texas over the last year, this issue can now cut through over inflation and the border and everything else voters will be thinking about in November?
I don't know that it'll supersede any other issue. All those are important issues. On inflation, there's no bigger driver of inflation in the state of Texas than Greg Abbott. Property taxes up $20 billion over the last 7 years because of this one guy. When he shut down international trade on our border, grocery prices through the roof. I mentioned our utility bills are up $50 a month because he allowed energy companies to steal billions of dollars from our fellow Texans and then pass the buck onto us. $50 a month every month for the next 20 years. So I'm going to make sure every single voter knows about that. But on this issue, you know, something that Wendy Davis just said really struck home with me. Intellectually, perhaps, rationally, logically, we understood this might happen. Now that it has happened, I can sense a complete change in the state of Texas. This is that much more real for people. And as Diana Limon Mercado was saying earlier, those who are going to be most affected are also overlapping with those who traditionally haven't been voting in Texas elections. The very young, those who are experiencing poverty, black and brown people in communities across the 254 counties, understanding now that their rights have been foreclosed by one person, Greg Abbott, and that Republican majority in the legislature. That is going to be energizing, galvanizing. I should say that is already energizing and galvanizing because we're seeing this and hearing this from people. And you will see this, Houston, this Saturday at 11 a.m. at Discovery Green. People are going to show up in record numbers because they want to be heard. And we want our fellow Texans and the rest of the country, for that matter, to know that what Greg Abbott is doing is not a reflection of who we are or what we want. And the one way that we're going to change that is to win political power by winning this governor's race.
Do you feel like Texas is really on the front lines of this, given SB 8, the particularly strict trigger law here? I mean, this does seem to be a frontline state for this issue.
There is no state of greater consequence than Texas on this issue. I mentioned that abortion is legal, and as Diana said, it is still legal today, pending this draft decision, for the last 49 years because of Texas, and specifically because of Texas women. Texas is also, through Greg Abbott, the state that is exporting this extremism and cruelty. You know, Oklahoma picked up a version of our bill recently, just as one example. And it's going to be Texas at the end of the day that not only ensures that we protect these rights for our fellow Texans, but by extension, given the outsized role that this state plays in our nation's politics, it is going to be Texas that saves the day for this country. And it's going to be Texas voters who make that happen.
So we've got time for two more KUTs right there.
Beto, in an abortion question, but Governor Abbott yesterday said that Texas might challenge the Supreme Court decision that would, that requires states to educate all children, including undocumented children, students. I'm just curious to hear your reaction to that.
This is very telling, and I want everybody to pay specific attention to the phrasing of this. Governor Abbott is against providing public education to all the children of the state of Texas. Now, he's saying out loud what we know he's been working on ever since he became governor. He's trying to defund our public schools. Public school educators in the state of Texas are underpaid on average $7,500 against teachers nationally. In some communities and counties, it's $10,000, $14,000 under. That's why half of Texas educators work a second or a third job right now. He has told us that he wants to take our public tax dollars, turn them into vouchers, send them to private schools, thereby defunding public education even further. And in an interview yesterday, apparently, he has now said out loud that this has been his plan all along. This is another issue that could not make the contrast any clearer between the campaign that we are running and Governor Abbott's failed leadership in the state of Texas. We are going to stand up for public school educators. We're going to stand up for public schools in rural communities and big cities alike. We're going to make sure that Texas is the education state, and I want every single voter to know that.
Beto, is there any legal line you would draw on abortion if you're a governor?
I'm going to make sure that we work with the people of Texas on this, that we work with the state legislature, and that ultimately we do what I think all of us agree on, and what most everyone in Texas agrees on, is that this is a decision for a woman to make.
We're going to go to John at CBS. Oh, sorry, Fred.
Sí. Todos que estamos aquí y la mayoría de la gente del estado de Texas apoyan el derecho de cada mujer a hacer sus propias decisiones sobre su salud y sobre su futuro. Pero si vamos a hacer necesitamos ganar en la elección por gobernador. Por eso estamos en cada parte del estado hablando sobre este tema, pero también los otros temas muy importantes, la educación pública, el tipo de trabajo que podemos encontrar y la calidad de vida en cada condado del estado de Texas. Este sábado en Houston, en la 11 de la mañana, vamos a tener un foro con la gente de Texas para apoyar los derechos de las mujeres y de la gente que viven aquí. La decisión del corte es extremo, el liderazgo de Greg Abbott es extremo, la mayoría están en contra del gobernador Abbott, la mayoría apoyan los derechos de las mujeres aquí en el estado de Texas y en el país de los Estados Unidos, y la mayoría, yo creo, van a hacer el trabajo necesario para ganar el poder político, para hacer los cambios necesarios para que podamos proteger los derechos de mujeres aquí en el estado de Texas. Gracias.
Thanks, that's all.
Okay, thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for doing this today. Really, really appreciate it. Grateful. Thank you all.